Kia ora, Markie here with some more on ghosties. What's it? Ghosties and ghoulies, long-leggedy beasties and things that go bump in the night. I haven't got anything to say about long-leggedy beasties, which is a shame because I quite like the idea of long-leggedy beasties. Perhaps I'm a bit of a long-leggedy beastie myself. Anyway, ghosts, yes, and different interpretations, different theories about what ghosts might be. And again, one of the things that's really interesting is that different eras in history and in different cultures, people interpret things in different ways. So back in time, going back 1800s, sort of 1700s and before, if you had a lot of things moving around in your house, kind of poltergeisty type affair, then one of the common beliefs would be not that it's spirits of the dead, but that it's the fairy folk, which is kind of interesting. And that's not a belief that's entirely gone away, because we could do a whole video on fairy folk, couldn't we? What are fairy folk? So what do we know? We know that almost every culture has some folklore around, or a belief in other intelligent entities, creatures that are non-human and which sometimes interact with humans, or sometimes observed by humans, sometimes interfere with humans. So every culture has got this in one form or another. It's really interesting. And I found out that the Polish word for a kind of fairy or elf is Krasnoludek, which is one of my favourite words. Krasnoludek. So you get kind of bonus random facts on this channel. So, people talk about hobgoblins, and the in house elves and things. That we see that in Harry Potter, but that has its basis in folk belief. And sometimes they would be helpful. Sometimes they would do jobs around the house, hence the kind of Dobby house elf. Sometimes they would be playful and mischievous, and sometimes they'd be downright nasty. Okay, so if that happens today, it's interesting. This has even kind of changed. The interpretation of this has changed in the course of my lifetime, because it would commonly be referred to as poltergeist activity, things moving around in a house, but these days people are getting much more kind of into demons, and they would say that it's a demonic infestation of the house. Okay, so I'm not going to say too much more about demons because I've done a whole video on that. I was only doing a video on spirit possession, and one of the sections of that, one of the episodes talks, it's a long series, one of the episodes talks about what are demons, what might demons be. So essentially, I suppose, the similarity between demons and fairy folk are that what we're talking about is kind of non-human entities. Now today, again, we would look at them very much as a kind of spirits, but at different times in different cultures, people would kind of, would have seen, demons and fairies as sort of flesh and blood, really. The kind of concept of things being more ethereal has kind of come a bit later, really. So look at how it's changing. So fairies to poltergeists to demons. That's kind of how the interpretation and the common view has gone. So just going to say a little bit about fairy folk. So there's different theories. So some theories are that they are elemental spirits of the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Some people say that they're nature spirits, or they're tree spirits, spirits associated with different plants or parts of the landscape. And again, with all fairy lore, some belief is that, they can be friendly, they can be downright nasty, downright hostile, malevolent, and do all kinds of mean things to people. So like where I used to live in Devon and Cornwall, there's lots of folklore about being pixie-led, being led astray, particularly when you're out on the moors. The pixies would deliberately try and lead you astray so you got lost and things like that. So yeah, lots of beliefs around that. They're in every culture. Nobody's really got to the bottom of it. Some cultures hold the belief in fairy folk very seriously still today. I mean, Ireland used to be a big place for kind of fairy folk belief. I'm not sure that's quite so strong, but some of the Scandinavian countries, or countries of Scandinavian origin, they kind of they will actually kind of consider fairy folk in things like planning, like road building and stuff like that. If there's what's considered to be a fairy hill or something like that, then they won't build a road through it. So yeah, so it's interesting. So and it's interesting how the fairy belief kind of existed alongside Christianity, for millennia, a couple of millennia. Since Christ, I guess, and or since the Western world has become Christianized, so 400 AD odd. So it's interesting how people kind of could be quite pious, devout Christian, but they would also have a kind of a belief in fairies, and fairies they're not really accounted for in the Bible. You have evil, unclean spirits in the Bible. And you have angels. You don't really have kind of fairies. So I think what was one of the beliefs is that during the fall of the angels, the biblical fall of the angels, when Lucifer became too proud, had a bit of a coup d'etat in the state of heaven and was cast out, and he was cast into hell, and a big, a large kind of fraction, a large proportion of the angels with him that were on his side, and that the kind of some of the angels who were not quite as culpable as others weren't cast into hell, but were kind of cast out of heaven and made to live on the earth, and that's one of the kind of the ways that people reconciled Christianity with fairy folk beliefs. But there's nothing biblical about that I'm aware of. If anyone knows of anything, or certainly I say there's nothing biblical, there's nothing ecclesiastical that I'm aware of, but if anyone knows of anything ecclesiastical, so ecclesiastical as in kind of teachings of the church or churches. So that's another kind of theory behind kind of fairy folk. And of course the grey alien of today is the elf and goblin of history, I believe anyway. And they're kind of fulfilling the same role. So people used to people used to get kidnapped and have missing time experiences. If you went into the fairy realm, then you would often have missing time. That's in the folklore, and people talk about alien abductions today, and they have missing time, and there's strange kind of goblinoid creatures, the grey aliens and the other aliens. So not all fairies are small. That's the other thing. Giants, so things like trolls, giants. I guess things even like mermaids, and they would all be the same kind of thing, really. They belong to the same broader family, really. All these mythical creatures, or most of the mythical creatures. Some would kind of would you'd categorize in a slightly different way. But giants and dwarves, or gnomes, so gnomes are actually earth spirits, would be categorised. They'd all be part of fairy lore, and also creatures at the same size as humans. So people tend to think, the little people and stuff. So fairy, the way we've looked at fairies has changed a lot. They've been romanticised a lot with kind of Tinkerbell and Disney and things like that. They've been made into kind of quite glamorous, dainty, gossamer winged little things. But prior to that, they were kind of considered much more of a force to be reckoned with. And the word grotesque, interestingly, comes from the grotto. You have a fairy grotto, don't you? Yeah. So it's interesting that, just going back to think about the fall of the angels and maybe some of those fallen angels becoming fairies. It's interesting that nobody seems to kind of be quite clear about whether we put an angel or a fairy on the top of the Christmas tree. If you talk to all different families, they'll all kind of say something different. Some it's an angel, some it's a fairy. And I don't think it's to do with people's religious beliefs. I think it's just to do with people. They don't really think too much about it. They know that there's a winged kind of female creature that goes on the top of the Christmas tree, but they're not that clear whether it's an angel or a fairy. So that's quite interesting. Now, if you look at Islam, and some of the beliefs, the pre-Islamic beliefs that informed Islam, they have something which kind of accounts for fairy folk a little bit more directly, and that would be the jinn. Not gin as in gin and tonic, gin with a D, D-G-I-N-N, I think, which is also where we get the word genie in the lamp. So jinn were made of smokeless fire, and so like spirit, that's a way of describing spirit, isn't it? And the jinn were predated human beings, and some of the jinn didn't like it when this is according to Islam and the Quran, that when God created Adam, because Muslims have the same kind of Garden of Eden belief, they believe in Adam, that the jinn were asked to bow down before God's new creation, and they kind of said, oh, what should we, kind of, that's kind of sibling rivalry kind of thing, which is the origin of the kind of the Islamic kind of equivalent of Satan, who was kind of head of the jinn, and kind of said, no way am I bowing down before these new upstarts. And so in Islam, you get good jinn, you get bad jinn, you get kind of fairly neutral kind of jinn. So maybe the fairies are the jinn, but almost every culture different interpretation, but something they have kind of small people, or people that kind of live in the wilder places and the mystical places and interact with humans sometimes, and then sort of slip away mysteriously. And they're not the kind of people that you can kind of just go and knock on the door of. They vanish. They're ethereal and mysterious. So we would automatically kind of, so these days, stuff goes flying around a house. People say, oh, demonic infestation, because there's loads of stuff on YouTube about that. Since The Exorcist came out in the sort of mid-70s, that whole kind of consciousness around kind of demons has kind of crept in. And then if you think, in my youth, there's a lot of talk about poltergeists and a lot of stuff around. Poltergeists tend to occur where there's a young person who's like somebody's going through puberty and is in angst, and is it their kind of psychic energy rather than a spirit that's throwing things around? And recently, apparently, some parapsychology research has found out that these days, poltergeist, what was traditionally and has, still is known as poltergeist activity, isn't associated with younger people. I think it's now associated with people between 20 and 40. Whereas it was always kind of, archetypally or kind of stereotypically, it was always a teenage girl angst that would be the focus for a poltergeist. So yeah, ghosts, much more to ghosts and ghost phenomena than meets the eye, as I said before, and there's plenty more to say. We haven't got to the bottom of this yet by any means, so we'll be back in touch in another episode with some more spooky stuff. And if you like spooky stuff, I've done some of the videos. I've done videos on UFOs, I've done videos on what's known as ABCs, or alien big cats, or anomalous big cats. So that's like countries that aren't supposed to have panthers and pumas and things like that, where there are reports of people seeing them. So that's kind of part of what they call cryptozoology. So cryptozoology is anomalous and mysterious creatures like Bigfoot and Nessie. So I haven't done anything on Bigfoot or Nessie to date, but I've done something on alien or anomalous big cats. I've done stuff on spirit possession, did a long one on spirit possession. I've also done one on demonic possession and narcissism, which is kind of a response video to some of the stuff that's around at the moment. So check that out. There's actually a playlist. If you go to playlists, I think it's mystical, religious. I can't remember what I call it exactly, but that's where all my kind of spooky stuff is, and there'll be more spooky stuff to come. So remember, I'm not expecting you to believe any of this stuff, and I have a very open mind myself. I kind of think minds are like parachutes. They work best when they are open. So we just talk about beliefs, we talk about what's reported, what's in folklore, you know, what might be the orthodoxy of certain religions or the perspective of certain occult traditions. But yeah, I'm not kind of, you know, dishing out this information as truth. The truth is out there, which I always think is a stupid phrase. The truth is out. The truth's not out there, is it? The truth's in here as much as it is out there. The truth is just the truth. Anyway, enough, Markie. You're rambling. I will see you soon in the next spooky video. Rangimarie.